Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and you join me on the UK launch of this, the all-new Hyundai IONIQ 6. Now, some of you might remember I've already done a video on the IONIQ 6, but it was in a studio environment, and I got a chance to kind of have a sit down on the interior, play with the buttons and features, and see what things like the boot were like. But I couldn't get to drive it. So for this video, I will be focusing on what the IONIQ 6 is like to drive. Now, if you do want to watch my studio tour of the IONIQ 6, you can either click up there in the top right-hand corner to watch that video, or wait until the end of this video and click on the link at the end here. But yeah, I'm just going to take you for a brief overview of the IONIQ 6, especially with the exterior and the interior. But the focus, as I've said, is what it's like to drive. So instantly, when you look at the IONIQ 6, you can tell that the styling is very different to the 5, and that's been done on purpose. You see, Hyundai like to think of their electric vehicles as chess pieces on a board. They all look very different, but they're all part of the same game. So with the 6, we've got this very unique Streamliner look, which has been inspired from the Streamliner cars of the 1930s, and also some of the aircraft in that were flying around at the time, because there were some very unique designs. And there is actually an old ethos that used to go by, which is, if it looks right, it'll fly right. And I definitely think that the IONIQ 6 looks very right. They've taken the teardrop design that we've come to know and see in a lot of these kind of hybrid cars like the Prius and the IONIQ, the original IONIQ that is, but they've taken it one step further. I mean, this looks incredibly stylish, very distinctive, and very smart at the same time. And as I said, it's a departure from what we've seen from the IONIQ 5. The only thing that actually remains are the pixelated lights and the kind of pixel theme on the vehicles. Now, on the IONIQ 5, it was mainly on the light clusters on the front and rear of the car, but with the 6, they do go a little bit further, not just in terms of the daytime running lights and the lights at the rear, but also on the interior as well. And you know what, I think on that note, we need to go and see what it's like on the inside, but let me know what you think of the IONIQ 6's styling in the comments section below. Sat in the front of the IONIQ 6, again, you are just presented with a very comfortable, really nicely laid out interior that's jam-packed full of kit. Now, again, I'm not going to kind of talk too much about the interior because I already have done in the studio version, but with this particular car, I have got traditional wing mirrors and not the cameras. So what I do like is actually where the screens would be, we have got these kind of additional fins added on top, and they don't feel like it's an add-on feature. They actually feel like they just belong in the car. So I really do like that in regards to the design in here. And then we got all the storage solutions, which are again actually very inventive. Not quite as quirky perhaps as the IONIQ 5, because we don't have the floating center console, because this is designed for you to have your laptop on here so you can actually get some work done whilst the car is charging. And then yes, we are dominated by two 12.25-inch displays, one for your digital dash and the other is the infotainment system. And again, it's kind of like Hyundai are listening to their customers, because it just feels much more integrated into the 6's cabin than it does the 5. I do love this little chrome surround we have to it, and it's not split in the center so you can see two separate screens. It actually kind of feels like one screen that's been placed in here. Again, it's just a real nice feature, and you just feel like Hyundai are listening to their customer base, and perhaps because the 6 is feeling more like a, I don't know, like an executive saloon, perhaps they're just spending a little bit more time on the finer details. Now, speaking of the finer details, talking about the pixels on the lights on the front and the rear of the 6, we have got some pixelated kind of plastic work here on the dash. Also, on the dual zone climate control, there's actually little pixelated lights when you get the auto aircon working. We've got pixelated lights here when you've got your phone on the wireless charging pad, and even just like the little buttons around here, it's a little pixel, it's a little square light. These little attention to detail features I really do like about the IONIQ 6. Also, on the steering wheel, we've got 4 dots on here, but they do now come with a purpose. Firstly, the little gimmick is that it is the Morse code for the letter H for Hyundai. Secondly, when you're charging, these actually let you know what your charge rate is going on when actually charging up the battery. And the other thing I do like is when you're driving, they light up. Okay, nothing kind of new there. But when you put the car into reverse, they glow red. I think that's actually pretty cool, and just lets you know that perhaps, you know, you're in the reverse gear rather than the drive gear, so you don't bump anything behind you. But yeah, just being sat here again in the IONIQ 6 just brings back really warm memories. This is a really lovely, special place to be. Okay, granted, the lighter leather interior is probably not to my liking because I'd be wary of it getting a bit dirty, but it does mean you've got the option to really personalize your IONIQ 6 and make it your own. And on that note, I think it's just time we stop looking at the front seats of the IONIQ 6 and just have a quick look in the back. So, sat back here in the IONIQ 6, it is surprisingly spacious, particularly when it comes to knee and leg room. However, headroom is a little bit tight. But for somebody of my size, who's 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, I have no issues whatsoever being sat in the back of the IONIQ 6. But if you are 6 foot tall, you might find your head just rubbing against the headline in there. But yeah, if I just sit myself nice and comfortable, I've got a huge amount of knee room, and that seat is set to my driving position. And then when it comes to features, we got things like USB-C charging inputs. We have got heated rear seats as well. And I do actually like the fact that the windows, although they are tinted, they do allow a good amount of light in and open about 95% of the way down. And then when it comes to storage features, the door pockets they're of an okay size. You can't quite get a medium-sized bottle in there, and actually you might struggle with a small can of drink. We have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. There is a little cubby space here where perhaps you can put your mobile phone whilst it's charging. And then we've got the center armrest with a couple of cup holders. And then I do love the feature that we can actually move the front passenger seat here just by pressing a couple of buttons. So perhaps if you do want to put a child seat in the back of the IONIQ 6, you can easily get the front passenger seat forward. Now, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and it is actually not too tricky to access the bars in there if you do want to affix a child seat, but I will mention that there's no plastic covers on there. So yeah, it's actually really nice and comfortable back here in the IONIQ 6. But as I said, if you are a little bit taller, yes, you might find it a little bit claustrophobic in here, and some of the kind of areas and cubby features could just be a little bit bigger. But I do like the fact that we've got a good amount of kit, the heated seats, the tinted windows, so everything does feel really nice and plush. And like I said, for somebody like myself, I could easily do a long journey, sat in the back of the IONIQ 6 and come out the other end feeling nice and relaxed. And on that note, I think it's time we quickly look at that boot. Now, one of the things about the IONIQ 6 is that it does only come as a saloon car. Now, that might put some buyers off, but it does mean that we have got this very aerodynamic design along with the twin spoilers. Now, when it comes to getting the boot open, if you recall when I did the studio video, I actually guessed it was around about 400 litres of space. And believe it or not, I was off by 1 litre. It's actually 401 litres of space here in the back of the IONIQ 6. And that's actually a very decent amount of space. Now, granted, with it being a saloon, it does mean we have a relatively narrow aperture if you do want to load perhaps a suitcase or a few weekend bags, but it is actually very deep. There is a little bit of a boot lip to navigate over, but otherwise than that, apart from that, you can get a few weekend bags in there, and it is very usable. Now, when it comes to features, we have got, well, the only thing we've really got here is actually there's a couple of pulleys to get the rear seats down if you want to add or load any longer items in there. But we haven't really got any tethering hooks, nor have we got a 12-volt socket. But we do have a little bit of additional storage space underneath for your tyre puncture repair kit, but it's not really enough to perhaps put your charging cables in there. But in order for storing your charging cables, you're probably going to be looking at the front of the IONIQ 6 because the car does come with a frunk. So yeah, I'm feeling quite proud of myself that I was only off by 1 litre on the rear boot of the IONIQ 6, but I do actually think it should be a very usable amount of space. And like I said, if you have any complaints about the fact that it is a saloon car, don't forget Porsche's first electric vehicle was also a saloon, and that's been doing pretty blooming well for them. But yeah, I think that's enough of looking at the boot of the IONIQ 6, and as I said at the beginning of this video, we're focusing on the drive-in, so let's go for a drive. So once you start driving the IONIQ 6, just like the IONIQ 5, it's a very positive experience. It's very quiet, easy to drive, and very refined. However, there is a different feel to the cabin and when you start driving compared to the 5, and that's because of that Streamliner look. Now, because this is more of a saloon rather than an SUV like the IONIQ 5, well, I call it a mega hatchback, it does mean that you are a little bit lower to the ground, but visibility is still actually really good. The A-pillars are not too thick, and I've not actually found myself looking around them at any junctions, and if I look over my shoulder, I actually see I haven't got the thickest of C-pillars, which in a sedan style car is a big surprise. Also, rear visibility is a real positive as well. However, the headrests do slightly obstruct your view. Also, I have got traditional wing mirrors here on this particular 6, but I have driven with the cameras for wing mirrors, and both are absolutely lovely to use. I mean, with the cameras, yes, you have to kind of adjust where you're looking in the cabin to see what's behind you or in your blind spot. But what I love as well is that you do get blind spot monitoring with both traditional wing mirrors and the cameras. So yeah, once you start driving in the IONIQ 6, just like the 5, it's a very lovely, positive experience, but you can tell the difference between the two cars. Now, when it comes to trim levels in the 6 range, just like the 5, there are 2 to choose from. There's the entry-level premium and the top of the range ultimate, which is what I've got here. Now, I've not driven the premium, but I did really love that with the IONIQ 5, just because you had slightly smaller alloy wheels and it actually meant you had a better ride quality. Now, I'll be honest, in this ultimate trim, the ride has been really lovely. We have got the larger alloy wheels, and of course you're going to get more standard kit, but you do have to pay a little bit extra. And it basically comes down to what you want from the car. I mean, both of the trim levels are very keenly spec'd, and I would say if you're not too concerned about having things like full leather interior and a sunroof, then go for the premium. You're not going to be disappointed. Aesthetically, there's not a huge amount of difference, mainly of the body panels, but really you're still going to get an incredibly striking car and just save yourself a little bit of money as well. And when it comes to things like the batteries, well, there's only one to choose from, and that's the 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. So really, you're in a good position regardless of which trim level you go for. But if you're thinking with your head, you're probably going to go for the premium, but if you're going to think with your heart and you want everyone to see your 6 and you want to show it off, then by all means go for the ultimate. But just be aware, yeah, you got to pay a little bit extra. Now, when it comes to powering the IONIQ 6, it's really nice and simple. There's one battery available and there are 2 power outputs. Now, you can go for a rear-wheel drive version that comes with a single motor, or an all-wheel drive version and that comes with 2 motors. So the rear-wheel drive version has a little bit less power. It's got around 225 brake horsepower, and if you go for the all-wheel drive version, you've got a nice jump in power and performance, and it goes up to around 322 brake horsepower. So that's definitely the one you want if you want to get somewhere in a hurry. Now, when it does come to performance, 0 to 62 in the rear-wheel drive version takes a little over 7 seconds, about 7.4, but the all-wheel drive version, yeah, it's a smidge over 5.1 seconds to 62. So there is a good amount of performance there, and there could be the possibility of an N version coming in the future. Of course, we have all seen that very lovely RN22 concept car. So yeah, when it comes to the power and performance of the IONIQ 6, it's got the perfect amount for everyday use. And of course, if you want to go for that all-wheel drive version, you have got then the confidence to chuck it about into some corners, and you've got the security of the all-wheel drive grip. But with the rear-wheel drive version, yes, less performance, but you do get more range. So the big thing about the IONIQ 6, of course this being an electric vehicle, is range, and both the rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions do give a claimed range of over 300 miles. In fact, the rear-wheel drive is around 338 and the all-wheel drive is just a little bit behind at 322 miles, and that's a WLTP combined cycle there. So that's a bold claim from Hyundai, especially with the all-wheel drive version, because that is a heavier car. Now with the rear-wheel drive version, with that 338 miles, it does actually mean it beats the likes of the Tesla Model 3. So that is why it has such a headline figure to it. And that's down to the fact as well that A, it's a bit lighter because it's a rear-wheel drive version and not an all-wheel drive version, but B, because of that Streamliner design. In fact, this has got a drag coefficient of 0.21, so it is actually the best in class. And that's why it's got such a unique shape. It's designed to just kind of slip and slide through the air. Everything about the car has just been aerodynamically tweaked to make it as slippery as possible. There's actually no real design aesthetics on the exterior where a design has kind of been a bit bold and creative. They've taken that design to make it as slippery as possible, but also make it as good looking as possible at the same time. This is a very striking car that happens to be very aerodynamic. And this is something that I really do love about the Hyundai group. We're seeing it with other brands, and I'm not going to mention a particular premium German brand, where they're doing the same kind of designs, but it just looks a little bit bland. It looks like essentially a jelly mold with wheels. This has some real character about it. It's not going to just blend into the background. So that's a great thing about this design, is that it will be lovely and slippery going through the air on a long journey, and it should be able to give you some realistic figures, perhaps with the rear-wheel drive version around 300 miles. The all-wheel drive version, I would say maybe 290 realistically, especially on a good day with good driving and weather conditions. So yeah, some very bold claims from Hyundai regarding the IONIQ 6, but if you drive in a frugal fashion, you should be very pleasantly surprised with the end result. So what's the ride and refinement like in the IONIQ 6? Well, this is the UK launch of the car, so I haven't got it for too long, but I am having a decent amount of time driving the 6 on a lovely mixture of roads. A roads, B roads, with a few potholes and undulations, as well as a little bit of faster driving. And I'm really impressed by it, but the one thing I would say straight away is just do not expect a magic carpet ride. There is a firmness and a tautness to the suspension setup, which means it deals with the bumps and imperfections really well, but you are going to get the occasional boom and vibration coming into the cabin. So that is something to be aware of with the 6. It does feel a little bit firmer than the 5, but I did actually love the premium trim level of the 5, not the Ultimate, because it was a little bit more comfortable. Granted, that did have a little bit of body float when you went over a humpback bridge or a level crossing, and I know that the tweaked 5 coming out later this year is going to deal with that. But I've not experienced that in the 6. In fact, it just settles very quickly. It's got a very nice composed feel on the road. And yeah, it's just very comfortable. As I said, you just get the occasional bump and kind of boom coming into the cabin, but we have got those larger alloy wheels here on the Ultimate trim. Now, when it comes to refinement, again, it's actually a real positive. The only real intrusion into the cabin is tyre roar. That's really it. I've not really got that much of wind noise coming from either the cameras or the traditional wing mirrors, which is a real positive. And again, it adds to that Streamliner design. So I definitely know I could do a long journey in the 6 and come out the other end feeling lovely and relaxed. And you just heard a little kind of boom and rumble there as I am driving over not the most loveliest of quality tarmac, but it's just really lovely. I can actually do a long journey in this 6 and I would come out the other end, yeah, feeling lovely and relaxed, because it is a very comfortable car to be in. So as I said, it's firm, but it's not uncomfortable. The seats themselves are very comfortable, and they do take a massive sting out of any major imperfections you might experience in the cabin. So yeah, the ride and refinement levels are doing really well. I mean, this is a very comfortable place to be. Kind of it gives you the the reason why this got Car of the Year for 2023. Now, when it comes to the 6's handling, just like the ride, don't expect this to be a sporty electric vehicle. It's definitely not a baby Taycan, but because this is meant to be a nice, wafty, comfortable cruiser, the steering, I'd say, is actually really good and perfect for everyday driving. So, firstly, the actual steering feel in my hands is really lovely. I do love the quality of the leather, and it is a really lovely size. And then it's just got a good amount of weight to it, so you can chuck it into the corners and kind of know what the front wheels are doing. I mean, there is a bit of lightness to it, which makes it very easy to park, but it's not over assisted, so it feels like a video game. So when it comes to everyday driving, you'll have no issues whatsoever. But if you want to chuck it into the corners, you can do, and it does actually hold on and, yeah, feel quite sporty when you do put it into sport mode. But again, don't expect it to put the kind of smile on your face as something like the Taycan. But granted, yes, that's a car that costs a lot more than the IONIQ 6. So in regards to kind of the overall drive quality of the IONIQ 6, I'm really impressed by it. It is very comfortable. Granted, as I said, the ride is a bit firm and it is set a little bit more to the firmer side, but it is very refined. And if you do want to chuck it about on the twisty stuff, yeah, you'll be pleasantly surprised, but it's not as rewarding, as I've said, as other cars out there. Now, when it comes to charging the 6, just like other Hyundai Group products, we have got 800 volt charging, so the key number is 18, going from 10 to 80% in just 18 minutes using a supercharger or a 350 kilowatt charger. The other figures, as you can see, I'm putting them on the screen right now for you, but they are really impressive. I mean, that's one of the key features of these Hyundai Group cars, or Hyundai Group cars as I should now say, is that they have got really class-leading charging capabilities, especially when compared to their rivals. Now, there are other little features we've got on the 6 that will help you when it comes to regeneration. Now, the first one is the brake regeneration, and just like other Hyundai Group cars like the IONIQ 5, the EV6 and GV60, we have got the flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel, so you can go through various modes or levels of regeneration. And not only that, you can have a full I-pedal effect. So essentially you just need to use your right foot on the accelerator pedal and the regen braking will do the rest. So that's actually a really nice feature. But what's also now been added to this is actually an auto regen feature. So the car will decide what type of regeneration you're going to need. And that will definitely come into its own when you have the radar guided cruise control in effect and perhaps you're driving along on the motorway. So that way it will use the regen if there's a car in front of you, or perhaps if somebody pulls in front of you whilst you're on the move. So that, again, that is a nice handy feature. Something as well which is a first for a Hyundai Group car, or for the 6 I should say, is the fact that we've got automatic preconditioning for the battery. So if you are using the just checking there, sorry, just going at 1 mile an hour over the speed limit and it has told me off. Is it actually using the satellite navigation, is that it will actually precondition the battery as you are approaching a charging network. So if you are wanting to use a supercharger like an IONIQ 350, then as you get there, everything will be set to get the maximum amount of charge back into the car. So it means you can just do a quick wee and a cup of tea and get yourself back on the road. So that's another feature I really do like now on the new 6, and it does mean as well, yeah, going from one side of the country to the other is not as stressful as perhaps it would have been a few years ago in other electric vehicles. So this is definitely a car that's moving forward. So what are my thoughts on the new Hyundai IONIQ 6 here on its UK media launch? Well, I completely understand why this has gotten Car of the Year for 2023. It pretty much ticks every single box for what you want from an electric vehicle. The design is meant to be as slippery as possible, so boost efficiency. We've got a very decent sized battery with brilliant charging capabilities, and it rides and handles incredibly well. As I said, yes, it's not a sporty car and it's not the most wafty of cars, but it does everything it needs to do and it does it very, very well. This is just a really lovely place to be. You can tell that it has this very different vibe compared to the IONIQ 5, and it means as well that we haven't got this rush and dole effect when it comes to their design language. You can actually have like an individual feel to every single Hyundai Group car that you get. Hyundai are doing it with the IONIQ 5 and 6, Kia are doing it with the EV6 and now the EV9, and Genesis, well, they've got it with the GV60, GV70 and G80 electrified. So yeah, this is definitely the motor group to watch out for because they are on a roll and I can't see them slowing down anytime soon. So I do apologise for the little bongs there. It is one of the safety aids, just to kind of have a go at you if you go over the speed limit, even by 1 mile an hour, I will add. So yeah, the new Hyundai IONIQ 6 is just an absolutely brilliant electric vehicle. I will be honest, there is one, I'll say, downside to the car, and that is the fact that it comes as a saloon, because saloons are not a big seller here in the UK. But as we've seen with the Porsche Taycan, it doesn't really matter. If you want the car, you'll definitely end up going out and buying it, and I think you will do that with the IONIQ 6. If you're not a fan of the 5 and you want something that feels a bit more special, then yeah, the 6 is going to do it for you. So yeah, the Hyundai IONIQ 6 is a brilliant electric vehicle. Even though I've only driven it for a few hours, it does feel pretty special. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my video of my first drive in the new Hyundai IONIQ 6. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, if you've got any questions or comments about the IONIQ 6 and my time with it today, please put them down in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So yeah, I've really enjoyed driving the IONIQ 6 today. I can't wait to get one for a proper review for you guys. But in the meantime, have yourselves a wonderful day and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care everybody, and bye-bye.